Hi everyone, Marvin here with MGM Consulting, and I want to speak with you today about the topic of coaching and feedback. And you know, it's amazing how this shows up in our lives all the time. It shows up in our personal lives, it shows up in our work lives, and I want to talk to you about what it means when you have an effective coaching and feedback model that you can leverage. And we found that oftentimes leaders are very good at their work. They're great with a skill set that they have. They're very talented, they have experience, but sometimes a talented leader without an effective strategy on how to provide feedback can stumble. We found that there are times when someone who is effective in their work normally day to day, when it comes to a conversation they need to have with someone, they often trip. And it's not because they don't have experience, and it's not because they don't have knowledge or ability or skill. It's because they just don't have an effective strategy on how to do so. And I want to share a couple of things with you today that I think might make a difference. I want to start off with something we call the coaching competencies model. It's really a model for communication, and we notice that there's a pattern for what communication looks like when someone's going through a coaching process. For example, the model behind me, we notice that there's an initiation of the dialogue, and someone who is effective at their communication, they will connect with that person. They'll talk about something that's important or something they have in common. They will bring up conversation. When there's a breakthrough in communication, they do a great job of connecting. However, when they're not sure on what their strategy is for connecting with another individual, they have a tendency to confront. We've heard the damage that the following words can have both in personal relationships and in work relationships, and it sounds a little something like this: we need to talk. Now, I've actually seen leaders do this visually and physically in a room. Turn to another person and say, we need to talk, and all of a sudden, all the psychological trust that has been built between these two is eroded immediately. There's a lack of trust. They feel like they're being confronted, and we find the ability to connect is important. Now, in addition to that, they do a great job of explaining, giving their point of view. They do what we call sharing what's going on for them. Now, that's a great way to utilize the coaching competencies model, but we found that there is a tendency for people to tell. Have a seat. Let me tell you what's going on. Let me tell you where you're screwing up. And so we found it's important to share from a concern standpoint what's going on for you. Now, that's the second element. The third one is that they really listen. They hear what the other person has to say. We find that in the coaching competencies model, this is critical. It's really important to listen actively, to restate what you believe that they are saying so that you make sure that you're interpreting it appropriately. However, the truth is, if most people are transparent and are authentic, we find that a lot of leaders in this particular stage will tell us that they find themselves thinking and not really hearing. They're actually thinking about how they're going to formulate their next argument, thinking about what they want to say while the other person is speaking. Caution. That's a red flag. Be careful of that. Now, the next element is, we call it determining what you want to do with the new information. In other words, someone who's effective in creating breakthroughs in communication through a coaching process will engage the other person in determining what the next best steps are. What should we do from here? What's this going to look like? How do we help this change in the future? What do you recommend that we do? And we find that a lot of people who create breakdowns in communication during this process, they tend to demand. Let me tell you what you're going to do. Let me tell you what you are going to change in the future, and they make demands. And then the fifth step is really following up and taking action. We find following up, making sure that you check in with them, is really important. Most people hope it goes away. Most people hope it changes, and most people will sit back and observe, and they actually wait too long to be effective in following up. So you want to make sure you take the lead as a leader to follow up. When there's a breakdown in communication, we found that most people don't follow up. They follow them around. We say they don't supervise, they snoopervise. And they're checking around the corners. Are you doing what I said? Okay, you are this time, but you better be watching out, because I'm going to be watching you. And I want you to know, don't be careful of trying to snoopervise your team members. The point here is to encourage them to follow through with the behavior they committed to when you engage them in the process. Now, we found that breakthroughs in communication can take place when people connect, share, ask and listen, engage, and follow up. Breakdowns occur in communication when people tend to confront, when they tell, when they think instead of listening, when they demand on what must take place, and then they follow them around just to make sure they're doing what they're doing. And we found that creates breakdowns. In fact, breakthroughs in communication create engagement in the process. We find that it can have an impact and really positively influence. One creates engagement, the other one creates compliance. And when people have breakdowns in communication and they confront, will the other person comply? The research says yes, for a while. They'll comply for a while. But when they feel disrespected, when someone confronts and then they tell and then they just think and not really listen and demand and then they follow them around, will they comply? And the answer is yes, they will for a while. And then they do one of two things. They either quit and leave, or worse, they quit and stay. And you do not want that. And you'll find yourself managing more challenges when people quit and stay. So, this is one competencies model. I want to give you a quick formula for feedback as well. Now, I'm going to send you this document so you have greater clarity on what it says, but I'm going to throw this up here so you have a chance to see it. We call it the AEIOU model. And some people, when they're communicating, if they don't have a great effective strategy on providing some quick feedback, that moment when you say, hey, do you have a minute? I just want to chat with you. We found that without a strategy, they can stumble here. It's almost like speaking with only consonants and not filling it in with a vowel. So we call this the AEIOU model, and it's very simply this. A stands for approach. Approach in a private setting. We say this, praise in public, but you want to be careful to make sure that you discipline in private. So make sure you approach at a place and a time that is comfortable for you both. I would caution you this, that if you have an office, if you have a location where you normally sit, I actually encourage you not to make that the place of discipline. Find a neutral spot. It can be a conference room, it can be a different location, you could go for a walk, but we find it best not to make it your office, because what that means is they create an association to your office, to your seat, that when I walk up there, uh-oh, I might be in trouble. You don't want to create that association. These are usually one-off conversations, and you don't want to create a negative association with where you typically work every day. The E stands for expectations, and it simply says this. After you've established your approach, that you're going to have a private conversation, that if you need to give someone some challenging feedback, that you start with your expectations. Now, I will tell you this. Best to share expectations when you've already set them. So in other words, if you have not established clear expectations on how you want your team members to interact, I encourage you to do so. And I will tell you that what we've found is 18 pages of expectations are actually less effective than 6 or 8 bullet points on a page. I'm not talking about a job description, and that's a good thing. If you don't have a job description or a clarity of role that you need to give someone, that's a good thing. What we're talking about is expectations. Let me give you an example of one. When we hold meetings, I expect to hear your voice. That's one that I've seen leaders use. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, even if it's simply this. I agree with Mark said. I agree with what Mary said. If it's just an agreement, I still want to hear your voice. You matter. And then when someone comes in and for 8 meetings in a row, they're silent, they don't say a word, that causes concern, and they want to provide that type of feedback. That's just one example of an expectation that of 6 or 8 you might have on a page to ensure people know what expectations you have for them as a leader. Now, having said that, when you sit down with a person in a private setting and the ability to share, I have some expectations for the team, and one of them is this component. And the third one is impact. When someone comes to a meeting and their voice is not heard, I want you to know we miss your talent, your experience. We miss the ability to call upon all the greatest strengths of the team. We're missing a component, and it can have a major negative impact on the team. Your voice is important. So there's approach, expectations, impact. The fourth is observations, that you're able to share detail. We frequently do say that if you don't have specifics to share when you're giving feedback, you're not ready to give the feedback. You're not ready yet. You should have some clear details of the experiences that are taking place. For example, on Tuesday, we had our staff meeting, and you didn't speak one word. And then on Wednesday, we had our project team meeting, and you didn't say a thing. And then on Thursday, we had our leadership team meeting, and you remained silent the whole time, and I'm concerned. And so when you express your concern for them as an individual and for the organization, it's vastly different than you're not meeting the grade, and I'm concerned about you, right? That I'm worried that you're the right person for the role. We find that your expression of concern is best when it's about them as an individual, wanting to see them succeed, and for the organization. And that's observations. Make sure you have clarity and detail. The fifth one of the A, E, I, O, and U model is understanding. Do they understand what I just shared? And I frequently want to hear their words. I want to hear them say it in their words. So rather than say, do you understand me? And they go, yes. I frequently will ask, so in everything I just shared with you, what did you hear? Now, you'll hear things range from, I'm not effective, or you don't like me here, or you don't think I'm a good person, or whatever that may be. And if that is not what you are saying, make sure you clarify that. You counter it. If it's true, always tell the truth. You all know that. But the reality is if someone says, I truly believe that you just don't want me on this team, you have the ability to say, listen, I want to be clear here. I want you on this team. You're a valuable team member. You are critical to our success. I chose you for this team for a reason. Or you were selected for this initiative for a purpose. And I really believe that you have a lot to bring. My concern is that we're not hearing your voice, so we're not getting the talent you have to offer. And so now that you've heard that, what do you hear in what I'm saying? Share with me your understanding of what I've spoken. So I want to hear it from their words. And they say this, if you tell someone to do something, they'll do it. But you have them tell you, teach you what they just learned, and they'll understand it at a new level. And then last is you. The Y stands for you. And that's this. Sometimes people say, off with you, me lad, and be lively, and report back to me. And if they never report back, well, then that means they don't really care. They weren't really interested. They're not coachable. They're not teachable. Caution you on that. In fact, I encourage that you leave the initiative with the following similar statement, which sounds like this. Greg, thank you for sitting down with me. I appreciate you taking the time. And what I'd like to do is let's follow up. Let's set a meeting in 2 weeks. I'm going to go into the calendar and reach out into the calendar and set a meeting for 2 weeks from today because I'd like to hear how it's going. And I'm confident it's going to go great. But we're going to set up a meeting so that we can follow up on it. It'd be remiss on my part. I wouldn't be a very good leader if I didn't check in with you and make sure I'm providing the support you need. And so I encourage you to do that because a lot of people wait for the other person to report back and 6 months later they go, they just don't care. So you as a leader, take it upon yourself to follow up. But there's also a secondary benefit to it. That the moment I say, I'm going to go ahead and put on the calendar 2 weeks from today, that we'll reconnect on this topic and see how it's going. That in their brain, they instantly go, uh-oh, I need to change today. Not in a week from today, not in a month from tomorrow. I need to change today. This behavior, they're serious about it. They're going to hold me accountable to it. And I have the ability to adjust. And then when you reconnect, the opportunity to do the same. If they're not performing, follow the same steps. But I got good news for you. This same process works incredibly well when people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Hey, listen, Greg, have a seat. I want you to know that, that we've set this moment to take a walk, to talk about how things are going. And you know my expectation is that people will engage in a meeting. And that when they do, it has a positive impact on so many others. And I want you to know that my observation over the course of the last 2 weeks since we last spoke is you've engaged in every meeting. You have really asserted yourself, shared your thoughts, shared your ideas. Some were accepted, some were not, and that's okay. That's good. I want you to know I'm impressed with your willingness to shift your approach, and I want to thank you for that. And so I want you to know, what are you hearing in what I'm saying? And I want to hear their understanding of what they're doing really makes a difference. And last is, then let's reconnect again in a month. Let's reconnect up and just see how it's continuing to go. And so it keeps positive impact and influence, momentum toward the very subject that you're speaking about. This is what we call the coaching competencies model and the A-E-I-O-U-and-Y approach to feedback. And so with that, I encourage you, leverage the right strategy, and an effective leader will take their ability to influence others to a completely new level. So I encourage you, take that step forward and use these approaches. All the best to you, and I can't wait to hear the level of success you accomplish as a result. Thanks.